I'm Amy McPhee Allabest.
And I'm Leatha Udayabhanu. And today we're going to talk about women building bridges
and burning them. In the months since Vice President Kamala Harris was defeated in the 2024 presidential election, I've been following the reactions of Black women in articles and on social media. Black women raised $1.5 million for Harris in 2 hours when she announced her campaign. White women followed their lead in fundraising and promised their support, but in the end, exit polls show that around 90% of Black women voted for Harris, while only 47% of white women voted for her. 53% of white women voted for Trump. What I've been seeing from Black women are comments like, "I'm done, I'm exhausted, I can't do it anymore." And more pointedly talking to white women saying, "I just can't with y'all, I don't trust you." These last few elections have been particularly brutal, but if you know anything about history, you'll know that this exhaustion and this loss of trust goes way back before Trump and before the Black Lives Matter movement. If you've been watching this video series, you'll remember that painful schisms between Black and white women were already present during the first wave of feminism, and then again during the civil rights movement and the second wave of feminism. But that was in the 1960s and 70s. Do you know what happened between then and now? And how about other women of color, Latino women, Native American women, Asian American and Pacific Islander women? How about queer women? All women have been struggling under patriarchy, so have straight white women been able to work together with queer women and women of color during the past 50 years?
Remember how in the 1970s, the women's lib movement was all excited about prehistoric goddesses? One of the most famous feminists who was researching this topic was Merlin Stone, who wrote the influential book When God Was a Woman in 1976. In February of 1979, Merlin Stone hosted a women's retreat on goddesses and heroines, and she wanted to make sure that women of color could attend the retreat. So she provided a scholarship for 3 women, but only one of them made it. Her name was Gloria Anzaldúa. Gloria Anzaldúa was a Chicana writer and lecturer who was teaching women's studies classes at UC Santa Cruz and San Francisco State. When Anzaldúa showed up at the women's retreat near San Francisco, she saw that she was the only woman of color there. And she said that the management and some of the staff at the retreat made her feel like an outsider, the poor relative, the token woman of color. And all because she was not white and had not paid the $150 fee. Anzaldúa told Merlin Stone how terrible she felt, and as they talked, they realized that this feeling was not rare and not new. Anzaldúa knew she needed to write about it.
After talking with Merlin Stone, Gloria Anzaldúa talked with her friend Cherríe Moraga, who was also a Chicana teacher and writer. In 1979, they wrote, "We want to express to all women, especially to white middle-class women, the experience which divides us as feminists. We want to examine incidents of intolerance, prejudice, and denial of differences within the feminist movement. We intend to explore the causes and sources of, and solutions to, these divisions. We want to create a definition that expands what feminist means to us." They solicited essays from Black, Latina, Asian, Pacific Islander, and Native American women, and also specifically queer BIPOC women. They gathered the essays into an anthology called This Bridge Called My Back, Writings by Radical Women of Color. It was published in 1981.
This was really significant. For the first time in the United States, different groups of women of color were working together to build bridges of understanding through a book that explored their diverse cultures, classes, and sexualities. And keep in mind, this was before Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, before cell phones, even before home computers and the internet. It was much harder back then to gather people in different communities. But did you ever read it in college?
No. I'd never even heard about it until a couple of years ago when my friend Jen Lee Smith told me to read it for the podcast. Had you ever read it?
I hadn't even heard of it until a couple of years ago either.
Yeah, as powerful as this work was, it really only made it into wide circulation within women's studies and queer studies programs in universities. And I went to a conservative university where we didn't even have those majors, let alone this book. And it's so frustrating to me to see how white women just keep making the same mistakes over and over again. It really would have helped us to have had access to this information sooner.
I'm curious, Amy, what stood out to you as a white woman?
I felt a shift in my thinking even the first time that I heard the title, because I immediately thought of a bridge from women of color to white women, and then called my back. It sunk in immediately how exhausting it would be for women who were already dealing with so much injustice to have to do all of the labor to reach out to me. So the visual image of them using their own bodies to bridge the gap while I just stood there and then walked across their backs really hit me hard.
It's such a gutting and accurate title. Was there a particular essay that stood out to you?
Yes, there's this letter from Audre Lorde to Mary Daly that really hit me. Both of these women were super famous women's rights activists. Audre Lorde was a Black lesbian womanist who said famously, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." And Mary Daly was a famous white Catholic feminist who said, "When God is a man, then man is God." So those are two of the most well-known phrases in feminism. So in about 1978, Mary Daly sent Audre Lorde a copy of her book, Gynecology, which is about ancient goddesses. And Lorde wrote a letter back to her, which was published here. She says, "This letter has been delayed because of my grave reluctance to reach out to you. For what I want us to chew upon here is neither easy nor simple. The history of white women who are unable to hear Black women's words or to maintain dialogue with us is long and discouraging. I believe in your good faith toward all women, in your vision of a future within which we can all flourish, and in your commitment to the hard and often painful work necessary to effect change." But then she writes how, as she was reading Mary Daly's book, she noticed that every single goddess in the book was white, Western European, and Judeo-Christian. And there were so many goddesses and warrior women from around the globe that she could have used. But Audre Lorde just thought, oh, well, okay, it's fine. Maybe Mary just wanted to limit the scope of her scholarship. But then there was a whole section on global stories featuring women of color, but they were all negative examples, like just female genital mutilation. And so Audre Lorde writes to Mary Daly, "Mary, have you read my work or the work of other Black women for what it could give you? Or did you just hunt through only to find the words that would legitimize your chapter on African genital mutilation? Within the community of women, racism is a reality force within my life as it is not within yours. The white women with hoods on in Ohio handing out KKK literature on the street may not like what you have to say, but they will shoot me on sight. For beyond sisterhood is still racism." I was really struck by this passage because it's so real. Lorde says that she was reluctant to send the letter, and it makes sense that she was. It's a lot easier to share a critique with someone you don't know. It's a lot harder when it's someone that you do know, like a colleague or a friend. And I'm so grateful that this was published so that white women can examine ourselves and ask, what am I missing? What am I not seeing? If Audre Lorde were reading this thing that I'm writing, what would she think? How would she feel? What stood out to you, Leatha?
Honestly, for me, the book is both validating and painful to read. In every piece, there's this beauty and this poignancy and this hope, but it's woven together with the ugliness and reality of oppression and dehumanization. And so reading it now, so many years later, that complexity and duality is also accompanied by this undercurrent, this heavy weight of how much has not changed. And in every page, I felt in my body the exhaustion of fighting just for the right to exist, to be human. You know, like I felt this exhaustion of being a bridge myself. It reminded me of every time that I had been a bridge for others, so many times when what I needed most was to be a bridge to myself and to my communities. You know, so as I'm reading, like I'm feeling the self-betrayal of being a bridge, of catering to people who were so content to walk on my back with no worry for how it made me bleed, no concern for the aftermath. And honestly, they often did not do much of anything with what they learned from my labor and sacrifice. That really impacted me. And like you, the title itself impacted me so much. The word radical is important to me as a radical woman of color myself, and it makes me think of one of my favorite quotes. Angela Davis said, "Radical simply means grasping things at the root." And I really believe that that is crucial for this work, for all of life, really, for all of us to trace things back and grasp them at the root. And one way to do that is the way you do that, by understanding and educating about history. But another way to do that is for us to allow emotion to unravel us, to lead us to the root, to grab the thread of that feeling, that pain, and allow ourselves to trace it back. There was one line in the essay, "I don't understand those who have turned away from me," by Native American Two-Spirit poet Christos. She says, "I read the funniest line in a health book yesterday. It said that for some unknown reason, more Black people had hypertension than white people." And honestly, when I got to that line, I read it over and over again and I wept. I let it sit in my body. How much has not changed in terms of health outcomes for brown and Black folks? How medical racism is still embedded in the system. It made me think of Indigenous women being sterilized, of Black women dying in childbirth, and so much more. And what I felt in my body most was rage for how oppressive that is to say it's an unknown reason. How characteristic of every single system of oppression, of colonization itself, to refuse to even trace back and look at the root, much less grasp it. That refusal, that ignorance, that flippant ability to be so detached, both from another's humanity and from your own privilege, it enrages me. I struggle to even say ignorance because in ignorance, there is a subtle implication of helplessness. But in this age of information, ignorance is willful.
Oof. So what would you say has changed between 1981, when this book was published, and now?
Not enough.
Then what do we do now? And actually, in asking you that, am I asking you to use your back as a bridge?
Well, yeah, you are. It requires so much for me, and I am choosing to be a bridge in this moment. I deeply believe that what we do now is grasp the roots. We can't heal society. We can't understand what is happening today without studying the roots. And what you do, grasping the historical roots, understanding the past and how we came to the present, that is crucial. Yet fighting oppression isn't an academic exercise. If we stop at simply studying the roots, we never get to the real work of actually rooting out the sickness and evil of oppression. Our work will always be to continually uproot the legacies of oppression within us. For those who are tempted to bypass this, your work will be to resist the temptation to shove down and avoid the shame and the disgust that rises within you, and to instead learn how to sit with it, learn how to let it teach you. Learn how to lovingly and compassionately hold yourself accountable.
I know that this is the work that you do professionally, Leatha. So I'm wondering if you can share a little bit on how to do that.
Absolutely. The work of sitting with and alchemizing our internalized oppression and oppressiveness, of honestly examining our humanity, it requires a skill set that is antithetical to the skills that many of us have. Because as a society, we're excellent at dismissing, at distracting, at burying roots, and then feeling semi-performatively shocked by the toxic fruit that emerges. And so what I would say is learn to sit with yourself. Notice what happens to your body, for example, when someone brings up race or racism. Notice the sensations you feel, the desire to run from it or to drown it out, and then keep noticing it. I don't teach how to show up perfectly because there is no such thing, but I teach how to show up consistently and sustainably by loving yourself and everyone else through it. And without this internal work, nothing will truly change. Yes, it is messy. Yes, it is complicated. And we are so beautifully capable of it.
Thank you, Leatha, from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you for having me.
And how can people find you to learn more?
You'll find my work linked in the description for this video.
Perfect. Thanks for watching. We'd love to hear your thoughts or questions in the comments section, and please consider sending this episode along to a friend or family member who might not have had a chance to learn this yet.